I'm Andy. I'm from the DPP. Some of you won't know who the Digital Production Partnership are. We're a small company, but we've got big shareholders. So we were set up by the BBC, ITV, and Channel 4 in the UK. And we were set up about 8 years ago to help drive digital working in the media sector to really kind of turbocharge development. So those three broadcasters saw there wasn't the change going on that they wanted to see. So they created an organization, and we became famous, I guess, in the UK for helping to get rid of videotape in the television production process. So we worked with the AMWA to create a new file format, AS11, UK DPP, to replace tape. And we did that all on one day. We got all UK broadcasters, Sky, BBC, BT, Channel 5, etc., all together, and they agreed that they'd stop taking tape on one day, and they'd take these new files and a whole new workflow that went with it. And we did that on the 1st of October, 2014. So that was one of our key achievements. And after that, we became a membership organization looking at how we take technology, we take people, and we represent the whole supply chain, and we transform that so that we can make change in the media workflows as a whole. We're a global organization. We work with 340 different companies. Our big members are Fox, CBC, Turner, Time Warner, Viacom, BBC, Sky, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Dropbox. So we work with a huge range of different companies to create new workflows, new technologies, and new tools to help media professionals deliver to TV and online. And today, I'm going to be talking about one of our new developments, IMF for broadcast and online, and why we believe this is going to be the start of a journey towards a global broadcast and production system. But before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Not formats, codecs, and containers, but actual shipping containers. Because I think that shipping containers are a really interesting metaphor about where we are in the media industry today. If you think back to how goods were moved, right? The shipping container is nearly a pensioner. It's 62 years old. It was created in 1956. And it came in because in 1956, so again, only 60 years ago, we were still moving goods around the world in barrels, in boxes, loose. And it would take a group of men and women who were loading those ships about 2 weeks to load a ship up with goods, okay? So it would take a significant amount of time to get all those goods onto a ship and then get them all off. It was hand-cranked, it was manual, it was massively prone to theft, loss, and accidental damage. And that's something that we have all the time in the media. There's another thing as well. The delivery of goods internationally was limited by the trade routes. So the ports that those ships could go in to offload their goods. If you're dealing with food or perishables, it meant where you could get hold of them was limited to how close you were to a port. Okay, it was really complex, and then getting it from the port to where it needed to be was really difficult. So the shipping container was brought in to standardize all that. And in standardizing it, it did something really, really interesting. It said all goods are going to be moved in boxes of this shape, this big. It meant that the cranes that you use to take those shipping containers off the boats, they're all standardized. It meant that the trucks that you put them on, they're all standardized. It meant the railroads that you can then move them around, they're all standardized. And it meant you could go from unloading a ship in 2 weeks to unloading it in 24 hours. And a big ship can contain 15,000 of these. Okay, so that's a really interesting thing. You've gone from a way of slowly moving stuff around the world to then turbocharging it and being able to move tons and tons of stuff. And that, of course, unlocked a global market for sales and a global supply chain. Now, if we look at 2018, those trade routes have been replaced by something else, by undersea cables. And these are enablers for our modern workflows, for the modern media ecosystem. And that's one of the most important things about how we move those files and that media globally. That underpins a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today. But also, the world that we operate in has changed. And I don't have to tell any of you about online players. You all know that. I worked for the BBC for 16 years and was involved in one of these trials. It was called the IMP, the BBC's integrated media player. We launched that in 2015. At the same time, Sky launched their video-on-demand player. A small startup called YouTube, they started. And another company called LoveFilm, which was acquired by Amazon. So 2005 was quite an important year for the development of on-demand services, certainly in the UK. Now, of course, the integrated media player became the iPlayer, but I have no idea why they chose to change the name as IMP, or Integrated Media Player. Is a very exciting name for the audience at home. I'm sure you'll all agree, absolutely. So, 2 years later, and we have some new companies coming in. Netflix and Hulu. So let's think about that. 2005 to 2007, we go from very, very few high-quality video streaming services to global streaming services. And we work in an industry where people say that we move slowly. Okay, we can move really quickly if we want to. And that's where the DPP comes in. So we know that TV's changed, and we know we've got connected TVs, addressable TVs, but actually in the UK market now, those broadcasters are starting to be beaten by other players, and not just the German supermarkets. Our friends at Netflix are now the third most important brand in the UK. But it's all still about the container and about how we can think much more efficiently about how we deliver those media assets globally. So, underpinned by new commissioning routes, new ways to get content to market, and new deliverables, or mainly global deliverables, actually. And that's, again, where we start to think about there's got to be a better way to encapsulate all of that high-quality media into a way that we can deliver it much more simplistically. Oh, and there's another challenge. If we accept that all of our businesses are going to go global, then we have to start thinking about the different versions that we have to create. And that's where IMF does come in. It helps you to version and to deliver in a much more efficient way. And I'm going to tell you about how that works in a second. But before that, I'm going to talk about Doctor Who, because this is one of the programs that we use to model with the BBC about how we could build more efficiency into the way that we deliver high-quality programs around the world. So how many people know Doctor Who as a concept? Okay, there are some technologists in the room, so that's good to hear. So Doctor Who, if you don't know it, it's a drama, it's a sci-fi drama, it's 50 years old, it's over 50 years old, and the BBC planned a big 50th anniversary episode. It was 77 minutes long, and in their wisdom, they decided that they were going to release the 50th anniversary episode at the same time around the world and into cinemas. So it was a big aim to really celebrate that big moment of Doctor Who becoming 50, or infinite, depending on your viewpoint. So what did that look like? Well, for TV, there were 3 different versions in 2D HD for different frame rates globally. And in 3D, again, left eye and right eye at different frame rates, and then the different language versions that were offered globally. So that was the TV deliverables, and there were about 31 different TV versions of Doctor Who that were delivered. But it was also, as I said, a cinematic release at the same time. So it went out to all of these territories in 2D and also in 3D in DCPs. So it went to a lot of places. And when we started looking at, well, what does this mean for the BBC delivering this program out there? It actually means a lot of complexity. If you've got 106 different versions of that program, that means you've got to manage 106 different variants. But also you've got to hold it somewhere. So your media asset management system is absolutely huge. In the case of the TV versions, we were holding 4 terabytes. So each version, and these bit rates, by the way, they're not bit rates, they're megabytes to make it easier. So it's 27 megabytes. You can do the sums if you want to work out the megabits. You can see here the DCPs, they made it huge. So in total, one program on the BBC's MAM was taking up 70 terabytes. And of course, the BBC doesn't just broadcast one program. It broadcasts lots of programs internationally every day. So we have to find a better way to manage this versioning challenge as we start producing more and more high quality content that was spoken about from the panel before, about how we can deliver that in more intelligent ways around the world, and most importantly, not break our budgets by paying for tons and tons of bandwidth to move it around and tons of other processing. So 90% of that material is actually duplicated. So if you think about it, you've got the Italian version, the French version, etc. They're all using most of the same material. It's just an audio track that changes. But yet we store each individual version as a different file in incredibly high quality content. So we've got to think differently about it. And that's where we came to with IMF for Broadcast and Online. If you don't know what IMF is, it's not a file format, it's a package. This is what an IMP looks like. Okay, it has some video in it. It has some audio in it. It's got some data in it as well. It might be subtitle data. It's got some metadata. It's got a CPL, a composition playlist, and think about that like an EDL. And then it's got some other files as well. It's got an OPL, an output profile list. And that's a bit like a recipe for what you can make it into. So if I want to make a file for broadcast in the UK, I want to make an AS11 UK DPP file. So that would be in my output profile list. If I wanted to deliver to Fox in the US, I might have a different format in there. Or PBS, I might have AS11X9. So I can start listing all my deliverables in there and then have it just as an XML file that can then be processed by a transcoder. I've got an asset map and a packing list, and they tell me where my assets are, because they don't necessarily need to be in my folder. They could be anywhere on the internet, and I could point to them. And I've got a packing list that tells me what I need to have in that package. So all of a sudden, I've got this way of holding very, very high quality content that can point to where it is elsewhere, and that I can then use to automate transcoding. And that's really important when we get down to our versioning. But we're not doing this alone. So the DPP are leading this work on behalf of the 340 companies and global broadcasters that we work with. But we're working very closely with SMPTE. And we're starting off a new process within SMPTE to state standards and then to constrain them down into specifications, and they'll be called SMPTE specifications. That means as a business owner, I can say, here's a standard or collection of standards that I want to use, but I want to be very specific about how I use them. So I'm going to specify this is the way we're going to use it. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to publish it as a document. And it means that manufacturers and buyers and sellers of content can then deliver into that specification. But to make sure we can reach wider than that, we've been working with the EBU and the North American Broadcasters Association to really look at that idea of global collaboration to come up with a format that works for all. And that was something that was spoken about on the panel before, about how do we compete or how do we collaborate in this world where we're all competing. And we've got a saying which is, we compete on content, so we compete on the stuff that you see on the screen, whichever screen that is, but we collaborate on technology. We work together to build common technologies and common ways to exchange media so that we can put as much money on the screen for our audiences and then on technology make it as efficient as possible. And that's the really important thing for us at the DPP. So how do we get to here? Well, like every project we work on, and at any time we're delivering about 10 different technology projects. This is one of them. We started with the business requirements. So we worked with all those broadcasters, all those content owners and said, what is it we really want to do? Well, we want to sell programs more efficiently. We want to be able to sell much. I'm going to strip that supply chain right back to make it really easy to sell programs. I want to click a button in Salesforce and then fulfill straight away. I want to make it easier to buy programs. I don't want to have to ring up 15 different people, go through all these different processes. I want to make it easier to buy programs. And most importantly, I want to make it easier to hold programs in the highest possible quality. So those were the 3 use cases that we came up with for IMF. But the problem that it presents is actually, in TV production, what we're really, really good at is making shows. And actually getting quite efficient at doing that, right? The problem comes is once we've made the show, pretty much everybody on that production is moved on to the next one because we're really efficient. We're good at using our resources well. The problem when we start making those big shows that we sell internationally is that over time, the amount of assets for the different versions just grows and grows and grows. And actually, the knowledge in the production team doesn't necessarily get retained. So what we find is the more versions we get over time, we actually start to lose knowledge. And that slows us down. So we spend all of our time having to think about, where's that asset? What can I put in this hole? Where's that subtitle version that I had made 3 weeks ago? Okay, so we actually start to have complexity bringing in there, which slows us down. And again, it slows down that fulfillment. It slows down the ability to sell a program. It's also really difficult to know which version that was derived from, because I've got tons and tons of edit decision lists in my post operation. So I'm having to remember, was that in the Russian version that we made that change? Where was it? Because each of them are grown piecemeal. There's no hierarchy. We don't see where it inherits things from. So we have to manage a lot of complexity in our heads. Second thing that we have is that quality starts getting impacted. Every time we then transcode, do a frame rate conversion, then put a mezzanine file out from that, then change it again, we degrade the quality of what we put out there. And that's something that we see all the time. Compliance edit, we change the frame rate. Then we have a subtitling, which then changes it again. And then we transcode for the Airmaster or for the VOD version. Each time we lose quality. Each time it goes down. So, we now know what we need to build, something that's all about reducing duplication, something that's about preserving knowledge, and something that's about really trying to keep that master quality throughout it. And if we can do that all together, we can make it cheaper and more efficient. So, why does it work for TV? Well, we think it works for TV because actually it's all about simplifying the process. But also, we want to make it so it's forwards compatible. And kind of people say that and then never ever do that, but we think that's an important thing to do. So as we were developing the IMF format for TV, we were out working in Japan, myself and one of my colleagues from the BBC, starting to talk to Japanese broadcasters, and they had a real problem. They're doing the build-up to 2020, they're shooting it in 8K, but they haven't actually got a format to hold it in. How can they hold those 8K rushes really well? So we actually took our plans, which was for IMF for 4K, and we extended it then to 8K. So now we're starting to talk about bit rates of about a gigabit a second. Seriously, seriously huge files. But what that means for production is that you can actually start to think about different resale cycles. So I'll sell it once for HD. I'll sell it again later for UHD. And then maybe in about 3 or 4 years' time, I'm going to sell that same program in 8K to a distributor. So I can start thinking about how I can be more intelligent about the way that I plan to sell, monetize my content by holding it in a much higher quality format. So let's think about how IMF helps this then. Well, the first thing is we stay at a master level throughout. And we always know where each of those versions is derived from. So we preserve that knowledge, which means we can exploit it. We can exploit it faster. And that happens because actually we keep that CPL, that composition playlist, and then we derive all of the different masters from it. So I've always got a hierarchy, a chain that I can look back through to know where that version came from and what it's derived from. So that's a really important thing. We preserve the knowledge. The second thing is I'm holding it for as long as I can at a really high bit rate. So in the case of our format, in ProRes. And I can keep it at ProRes as long as I like, up until this point, where I then have to go to an air-ready master, something I can put on my playout server, or something I can put on my head end. So at that point, I then go down. But what does that mean? It means I don't have to keep transcoding. I don't keep moving to different mezzanines. So I maintain the quality right until the end, and then I go down once. So I'm saving myself processing cycles as well. And we believe this is going to start the journey towards a cloud delivery model. Very much so, where IMF is held in a cloud MAM, it's selected by a playout system, it then automatically transcodes. We'll have done a high quality QC, so we'll then do a mechanical QC later on, an automated QC here, just to ensure that the transcoder hasn't brought any errors into that material. So we're starting to think about how we build that efficiency into the processes we do. Then it will deliver it to the VOD server and out to the viewer. But we'll take this further. In the future, that system will learn the customers that you trade with regularly, and it will automatically have secure APIs between them. It will automatically start learning the delivery formats they need and give them the option to transcode for them as part of that delivery. So it starts to become more intelligent. And it's all part of this idea of component content delivery. So what does that look like? Well, it looks a little bit like this. All of our media from the original version is lots and lots and lots of duplicated content. So we start slicing that up, and actually we just send the one file and then lots of XML. that tells the customer where those assets are and describes what's in there and the different break patterns that you need for that territory. So again, we send less content and more control files. And we just tell it at what point you need to put in those kind of those video assets and how many frames they are. So we just send some XML, and it does some very clever elements. So back to that Doctor Who example. Well, what did it do? Well, when we started doing the modeling, we went from those 31 TV versions, we saved quite a bit of storage. We went down to 90 gig from 4 terabytes. For that DCP version, we went from a lot, it was actually 70 terabytes down to 2.6, and in total, 3 terabytes rather than 70. So by using this mastering approach and keeping it in the highest possible quality, we reduced it right down, saved a load of space. And there's some slides that I'm not going to talk through, but if you'd like to have a look at them later, you can then start seeing the modeling we did between different versions of UHD, ProRes, and how that then incrementally gives you significant storage savings, but not just storage, but actually in your transcode and in your bandwidth for delivering via file shuttle as well. So all of a sudden, as you start packing these materials into that IMF wrapper, it really, really reduces a lot of the challenges that you find when you have to deliver these things. So what are the business benefits? Well, it automates the supply chain. Something we really need to do. We need to get smarter about how we deliver content. Gets rid of that versions. It gives us one way that we can exchange content globally. And as I say, we're working with Fox, we're working with PBS, we're working with Turner, with Viacom, with the BBC, with Sky. We're working with the biggest players who want to adopt this. So it's a really important way that they're all collaborating to choose one way to exchange media. So it makes it much easier. We're going to reduce the complexity of QC. And of course, when we came up with this, we didn't want to invent something new. So we looked at what was working for Hollywood, and we built on their expertise. We looked at what was working for Netflix, and we built on their expertise. But we looked at it from what are the challenges for broadcasters, what are their archives like, and how can we build a better system for that? So what if you don't want to adopt this? That's okay. Nothing's going to change today. If you don't want to go IMF, that's absolutely fine. But as we've heard earlier, the complexity of versions, so Ed's 9,000 different versions, that's not going to get any easier. People aren't going to start throwing away their old TVs and buying a new set just because you've launched a VOD player. That doesn't happen. So we have to learn to deal with this complexity and come up with cleverer technology solutions to do that. This is part of that journey. So what happens next? Well, we launched the business benefits back in April. We'll launch the specification in 4 weeks' time. So that will then be published by SMPTE, so it'll be in the wild at the end of June. By OBC, we'll see product demos and significant products in the market. And then towards the end of the year, we'll start adding that output profile list functionality as a published part of the spec. So we're going to start to see very, very rapid change. And by the way, standards usually take 3 to 5 years to develop. We started this work with SMPTE about 9 months ago. We're going to deliver in a month's time. We're all about speed. We're all about going fast for the media and changing the way we all work, but doing it together. So that's, for us, is where we're going. But we also do one more thing. We run a lab that then tests the tools. So we make sure that products and services that will create these files will interoperate. So we have an R&D lab based in partnership with BBC R&D that then tests the products that make these files. So we know if you buy a file from product A, it will work in product B. And that's really important to drive through adoption because people have confidence that the system will work. So that was probably the fastest run through I've ever done of IMF. If you've got any questions, I'll take them now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. And as anyone who's ever run a conference knows, the biggest interoperability challenge comes around Mac dongles. And so I'm going to ask you to stay up there while they switch out to Tina's computer for the next presentation. But does anyone have a question for Andy? If not, I've got one or two while he's up there. Yes, Ed.
Great.
I hear you recently launched a news standard. How does it overlap with IMF?
So the new standard's slightly different in that it's about how you move metadata from the newsroom out to the camera in the field and then come back. But actually what we're doing there, in essence, is just embedding metadata with the video clip so that you can carry the rights and the descriptions around it. And in the future, if you're doing a news documentary, absolutely that metadata can get packed into the IMF package so that you can then transport that with it, which means you can search through your rushes really intelligently. And it inherits all the other video clips metadata before it. So it means you actually get a hierarchy of data that means downstream you can do incredible amounts of processing, machine learning, and optimization around that content. So if I have an outside shot of this building, I might say, it's whatever building at 10 o'clock in the morning. I can then search it in my news database and drop that as a shot into my edit and not have to send a crew out to get it. And I can have it, at different days, summer, spring, winter, different times of day, different weather. I can then start to build intelligence into my system. So we're all about that. How do we build a future production system and efficiency?
Thanks. Any other questions? What about intelligent customer APIs, and how do they play into the IMF rollout, and how will they create a new approach for automatic approaches to transcode and quality control?
So I think that's a really important part of this. So as broadcasters that sell content and distributors that sell content and broadcasters that buy content kind of trade more and more and more, those delivery formats or OPLs of what customers want and what can be supplied can then be just a handshake. So it means that actually that can be completely automated. So I can say, I can have a secure API into Fox or BBC Worldwide, and they can then fulfill that either with an IMF, or they can say, actually, I don't want an IMF file. You can take care of my transcode and QC. Just give me format A, B, C, and D, which are the OPLs that I deliver. And then they're all automated. So again, it's just starting to pull content as you require it in the formats that you require it, and allowing the system to be intelligent to serve that out. Now, that's a bit of a throwaway line, allowing the system to be intelligent and serve it out. There's a lot of complexity in there, but it's not complexity actually that we can't solve today.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy. Once again, please give a round of applause for Andy Wilson.